So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Christina Stanley. I am the CEO of Fictionary, and Christina Strasbourg is the CEO of Agents Helping Writers. And we've been working together for a few months now. Of course, we discovered each other online. However, Christina only lives 2 hours from me, so that's kind of cool. We tried to meet in person, but my mom got COVID, and I thought, oh, I better not show up because I'm sure Christina doesn't want that. So we haven't done that yet, but we will soon. And I mean, Christina, I'll let you talk a little bit about your mission, but Christina basically is doing what Fictionary is doing for writers. Christina's trying to do from an agent perspective and help writers really submit the best possible manuscripts so they have a high chance of succeeding with agents. So she's full of kindness, also a kindness warrior. And I like working with Christina because true in her heart, she wants to help writers. So with that, Christina, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself, and we're going to talk about a few cool events coming up with Agents Helping Writers.
Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. This is so exciting. And thank you, Christina, for your kind words. It must be something in our DNA with the name Christina.
Maybe.
And I'm sure it won't get confusing at all to have the two of us talking with the same name. But yeah, so thank you so much. But yeah, so I'm the CEO and founder of Agents Helping Writers, and we run different events throughout the year, in addition to like workshops and things like that, conferences to kind of help writers get a leg up with agents. So we have a number of agents who teach some of those workshops, who work one-on-one or in groups with writers to sort of level up their manuscripts. So there comes a point where you can take it as far as you can on your own or with other services, but there's that little je ne sais quoi of what agents look for that constantly changes, what publishers are looking for that constantly changes. And of course, those are two groups that never tell you what it is. So we're trying to break down that barrier and have our agents give their insights on the industry and how to make your manuscript sellable, marketable, so that it actually sees a bookshelf in a bookstore one day. Or if you self-publish, then have it be the best it can be, and actually be one of the self-published authors that can make a living at it with great books.
Yes, and everybody wants your bookshelf behind you. Hers is real, mine is fake. So you really want hers, not mine.
I spoke at a conference the other week, and someone made the comment of like, I never thought of stacking my books like
Yeah.
this way.
I'm
And they're like, you can fit so many more books. I'm like, I know. It was
sure
like,
everybody on this call can relate to that of pile of books. Linda does it with her paperbacks too. See,
yeah,
she's
exactly. I just, there's a rule in the house. I'm not allowed to acquire more bookcases. And we already have about 14 of them in the house. So
ooh, all right. Yikes. So let's before we get to Q&A, because we already have questions, but I'm gonna manage those. Why don't we talk about, should we talk about story audit first?
sure.
Want to tell everybody
Um,
what that is?
for anyone who may have known about it before, it used to be called Book Builder. We've just recently rebranded it to the Story Audit. Oh, there it is. Basically, it's a 16-week program where we work intensively. We only take 8 to 10 writers per year. And we've worked very intensively on your manuscript with you to take it through our sort of branded audit process to bring it to a publishable quality, so that when you go out querying, you can have confidence that your manuscript is solid for what agents and publishers are looking for. That, of course, never guarantees you a yes, but you're more likely to get a yes than without it, usually, is our experience. We get great reviews from the students and writers who have taken it in the past. They're all there. Well, some of them are on this page if you want to take a look at them later. But essentially, people have been able to secure agents after going through our program, or they pitched 8 agents and all 8 of them said yes to see pages of their manuscript. Because we also have, as a bonus part of this, we also have a querying workshop that if you sign up for the story audit, you automatically get that at the end, where we'll help you kind of shape and pitch how to do that with your manuscript. And we've recently been partnering with literary agents around the world where they will accept queries from us directly. So if you take the story audit, program, if by the end your manuscript is of publishable quality because of the work you've put into it. Oh, my cat has discovered I'm on Zoom. If it matches what some of those agents are looking for, we will send that query in on your behalf. And those agents sort of prioritize what we send because they know we send quality manuscripts only. So that's a fun bonus. There's no, sorry. Really? Nobody wants to see your bum. There's no time limit on that. As long as you've done the story audit for that specific manuscript, even if you send it to us 6 months later saying, I've now shaped it the best I can be, we will still consider it to send to agents. Because we know quality takes time and we're not going to pressure anyone to, tidy things up in those 4 months. But it's a lot of fun. We work as a small group. We only do this once a year so that we can really pour our time and effort into each manuscript and each writer we work with. There's all kinds of fun things. There's surprises along the way. We deal with all kinds of things from, dealing with your structure to the fine lining of making sure you don't have filter words in your manuscript. We have special guests that come, so editors who work in literary agencies, we have them come in and also talk about editing your book from their perspective, because they are the ones, after you sign on with an agent, they are the ones who will be working with you to shape your manuscript if it needs a little bit of a boost to make it publishable. So we have some special guests. We have fun surprises along the way. We have fun workshops throughout it. There's a story audit book and workbook that you get along with it as well. And we make it manageable. So we don't expect, it is intensive, but we make sure that you don't have to turn something around in 5 days because we give you feedback on the work that you do along the way as well. So that's sort of
Yeah. So, I mean, Kristina, it's a fantastic program, and we're excited about it at Fictionary and wanted to share that program with you because many of you who have gone through and edited your own manuscripts in Fictionary are now looking to go that next step. And it's another alternative for you. There's many choices of what you want to do, but this one, I don't know, I just think it's pretty special, and it falls in line with what we're trying to do at Fictionary with helping everybody get their story ready to go and ready to publish. And Mark has a great question here. So how would Story Audit differ from Fictionary's structural editor program? So Kristina's program, Story Audit, is looking at, you're working on your own manuscript in it. The certification program is teaching you how to edit other people's manuscripts. So it's focused on you as an editor running a business versus you as a writer editing your own novel. And so you're looking at with Kristina's program, or Agent Helping Writers program, Kristina, it's to help you really specifically on your own novel. And the certification program is teaching you to edit a different novel that we provide so you can work on other people's novels. So that's the basic thing there. Okay, so before we go to Q&A, because we have questions here, I'm going to go over to, let's talk about, not this screen, sorry. Let's talk about, you know what I want to talk about. Sorry, I'm distracted. Yes, let me hit share, and then you can talk about, I'm making it like an exit hook.
I forgot to mention for the story audit, it is applications based because we want to make sure that your novel is ready to go through the story audit process. So I just wanted to mention that, and that application closed December 3rd.
Yes, so run your novel through Fictionary first before you send it into Kristina. That's the message there.
Exactly. Because we don't take just anyone. We want to make sure that you're committed to improving that manuscript, but also committed to improving your craft, able to take feedback and critique. It's always positive, it's always kind, but it is honest. If something needs to be fixed, we will share that. And we want to make sure that writers, their manuscript is at a level that's ready for this kind of program, as opposed to something that might need a little bit more work before we can get to that advanced level of looking into your manuscript. So you can go to other resources. We often redirect people to Fictionary because it's a great program. And there's some great workshops and programs there that can help you get your novel to a place where it's now ready for the story audit process. Starting November 1st, we have something called Draft Dash. So this is kind of like, that's my little book monster, I love him. It's sort of like an alternative to, I guess, NaNoWriMo. You can think of it that way. It's 30 days, but it's progress over perfection. So we're looking at making 30 days where you commit to having creativity in your life, you commit to working on your writing project. It can be short stories, it can be poetry, it can be a novel. It's really up to you. It can be revising a novel. We don't put a huge focus on word count, although that is a goal you can set for yourself, and we do have fun little badges for that. But we also recommend that people have a second goal, which is something like plotting out your book. Oh, Kristina, hello. She's in Draft Dash. And so
Not me, Christina, a different
no,
Christina.
the other Kristina, I should say, the SZ there. Yeah, so it's 30 days. We have all kinds of workshops, from setting writing goals for yourself, where you can set a goal to create a writing routine. You can set a goal to plot out your novel during that month, whatever it is that you want to tackle. We have mindset workshops to help you get unstuck, because that's bound to happen. No matter how dedicated you are to the writing, something's going to come up. So we're there to help you unstick yourself. We have premise workshops. We have the art of the hidden clue if you're a mystery writer or someone who wants to put foreshadowing in your book. We also have some self-care things like chair yoga for writers, so you can stretch out those crumpled up muscles that you've had over your keyboard for, the first 15 days of the challenge. It's a lot of fun. It's a great community of people. We're there to encourage people, help people meet their goals. We have Story Doctor drop-in sessions, Q&As, where you can get direct help on your manuscript. I am always lurking in our community Discord server, so I'm always there to answer questions, and so is the team is there as well to help people with their stories and that kind of thing. And so the event is $12, and that gives you access to all the workshops. There's replays. We've done our best to make events different times of the day so that different people in different time zones can hopefully find something live that suits them. And then we have the Dash Pass, which is $18, which gives you our bonus Halloween plot twist workshop on Halloween night. And we also have a knowledge pack that gives you a whole bunch of different writing guides and workbooks for all the different sessions and all the slides and all that fun stuff. But it's a lot of fun. It's super exciting. It's really an energized group of people. It's an energized event. We just thought we would share that in case anyone wants to join. There's a calendar of events on that page that Kristina just showed. So you can kind of see all the different events and workshops that we'll be hosting.
And I'll put them in again later, but I did put the links in for both of those events, which all sound exciting. And if I wasn't running Fictionary, I would do that and actually work on my novel.
Well, I will actually be dashing with people. I have set my goal to be 75,000 words in 30 days, and I'm so not going to make it. But that's okay.
That's okay. It's a goal. It's a goal.
Exactly.
All right, Kristina, are you ready to go over to questions?
I am happy to.
All right. So I'm going to give the first question to the other Kristina because she has our name, and just spelled differently, but that's okay. And her question is, when is it not too early to start looking for an agent?
You should look for an agent when your manuscript is ready. When it is complete, when it is revised, it's the best it could possibly be. You don't want to be in a situation where you query an agent who says, yeah, please send me the first 50 pages, and you don't have 50 pages. Or, yeah, send me the whole manuscript, and you don't have a full manuscript to send that's ready, because that agent is not going to wait for you. They're not going to wait 6 months to a year for you to finally send the manuscript they asked for. They got 300 queries a week. The numbers work against you in that scenario where they have other writers who are sending in the full manuscripts that are ready. So in terms of when is it too early? It's too early if your manuscript's not ready. If it's not done, if it's not revised, if it's not edited, if it's not clean, if it's not been proofread, if you've not had beta readers check it out and give you some feedback. It sounds like a big community when you hear there's 1,000 agents or 1,100 of them in the United States alone, but it's a small community. They all move between agencies. They all move between publishing houses and editing houses. They all know each other. They all know writers, and they get to know you, and you don't want to be the name floating around of an unreliable writer who did not submit their full manuscript.
Okay, so Peter, I think, has it's very similar question. You kind of answered in there. Which comes first, an agent or an editor? Where do you start once you have a first draft manuscript complete?
You can do a couple of things. I often recommend having a book coach when you first start writing. It saves you several revisions down the road, and you can start shaping your story right away the right way. But that's not always in everyone's budget to have a book coach or an editor start working from the beginning. So once you have a completed manuscript, I would say try and find some people in your life who are willing to read it and be honest with you. So don't ask your mom, because your mom loves you and she will tell you how great and amazing it is no matter what. That's who I get to read my stuff when I need like a little ego boost. I ask my mom to tell me what she thinks. So instead, I have 3 brutally honest other writers who will tell me exactly what's wrong with it, kindly, but they're not shy to say, this doesn't work, this doesn't make sense, this isn't clear, I don't get it, etc., etc. So if you have that, if you don't have people in your life who can do that, there's a lot of online communities where you can ask for someone to be like a critique partner or a reading partner, and you can exchange your work together. I would say it's important to find someone who likes the genre you write in, who likes the type of book you're writing. If you write romance and you give it to someone who likes crime and hates romance, then that person's feedback is not going to be as helpful as it could be. It's not that they don't have good intentions. It's just if they don't read romance, they don't know what romance readers are expecting, or crime, or whatever fantasy, whatever genre you're writing in. So that's important. And then I would say try and make your novel as best as it can possibly be before you get an editor, because they charge by the pass. So you don't want to have a novel go through 10 different passes and have to pay the editor 10 times their fee. If you can get some of those issues out that you know are known issues, and it's listening to that little voice in your gut that's saying, I don't know that this character is working. I don't know that this scene is working, because your brain will trick you. Your brain will say, no, it's fine. Nobody will notice. No, this is still good. Everyone will notice. That is your brain trying to protect you from having to do a whole bunch of work to undo something big like a structural issue or something like that. So that little voice, I have ignored it at times, and that's like the number one feedback that I would get is like, this thing isn't working, and you're like, oh, I knew that, but didn't want to admit it and do the work around it, but now I have to. So definitely, if it's in your budget, get a book coach at the beginning. If it's not in your budget, get a developmental edit. That is worth far more than any other kind of edit, because it's going to get your big picture issues fixed. You can always ask a friend to proofread. I get Microsoft Word to read it to me because you can hear all the typos through the mechanical voice. You can always perfect the language as best as you can. So
yeah, so Kristina, the other Kristina, has a follow-up question that I was going to ask, and she stole it from me. I don't know how she read my mind there, but what's the difference between an editor and a book coach?
So an editor is going to look at the piece of writing that you give them. So if you give them your full manuscript to look at, they're going to read it, and then they're going to give you usually something called an editorial letter that's going to say, here's the good stuff that's working in your manuscript, and here are the things that aren't working for these 6 big areas. And it's usually going to be things like pacing and tension, character, plot, voice, description, and setting. It's usually those big buckets, and they'll kind of write like a decent paragraph. You can expect the letter to be usually like 6 to 8 pages is about average. They'll tell you what's working, what's not working. And then you're on your own to fix it, unless you engage this editor and pay them additional fees if they offer it. Most don't. But usually they'll just read it again when you're ready for them to read it, and you'll have to pay them another fee. A book coach is someone who's going to work with you before you put pen to paper. So they're going to work with you to work through your plot. They're going to work through the characters with you. They're going to make sure that you're set up to write the story in the best way possible, in a way that you figured out the pieces that you need to write the story. So they're usually going to start with figuring out what your premise is, defining what the conflict is, defining if your story actually is a story and not a situation, to make sure that what you put into your novel can actually sustain a novel. There's enough conflict, there's enough character, there's enough whatever that's needed to actually be a book. Otherwise, we call that a situation. And situations aren't bad. All Indiana Jones stories are situations. Mission Impossible, all situations. Because James Bond, all situations. The character doesn't change. Maybe like the later Bond movies, fine, they've upgraded them a little bit. But the earlier Bond books, James Bond was the same person. Never had a relationship, never developed, never changed, never got smarter about the world. Those are situations, but they're still successful. A lot of adventure books are like that. But if you're not writing that genre, then you're going to need something else. So the book coach is going to figure out what your vision is for the book and help you put that on paper. They're usually going to revise the story with you along the way. So you might write 5 to 10,000 words, and then the book coach is going to look at it, and they're going to sort out the issues with you from the very beginning so that it doesn't cause problems in Act 2 and Act 3 later on. So those are sort of it's kind of like having not a co-writer, because they're not going to write it for you, but kind of having like a cheerleader with a whole bunch of knowledge who's going to support you along the way while also helping you and teaching you about craft and story, so that you don't have to write 10 drafts. You can maybe get away with 3.
Perfect. Okay, we're going to switch just a tad and go to Linda's question. What's really hot right now? So what are agents looking for?
Romantasy is number 1. This will shock no one. Thank you, Fourth Wing, for doing this, which is really funny because it was huge in Germany, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, Romantasy, and North America just heard about it now. But basically it's blending romance and fantasy together, but the romance is the central part of the story, and fantasy just happens to be the world and setting around it, as opposed to writing fantasy with a romantic element. So that is the biggest one. If you are trying to sell a fantasy novel that does not have romance at its heart and center, you can expect to be rejected right now, and it is better to wait because you only get 1 shot per manuscript. So it is better to hold back, wait a few months till this calms down a little bit, and then put your fantasy novel out there. That's number 1. Mystery is always selling well. Psychological thrillers are very strong right now. Mystery with character development is very strong. So you're probably noticing like Benjamin Stevenson's Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone. Fabulous book. But it's the voice that sold that book and how the story was told as opposed to the plot itself. Nita Prose with The Maid. I think she's on her 3rd book that just came out, with this character who's more neurodivergent, who works as a maid in a hotel and solves crime on the side without really understanding that she's solving a crime. So that's quite big. So it's having a very unique character who is solving your mystery. Psychological thrillers in general are very big. Unfortunately, young adult is on the downslide right now. Not a lot being acquired. A lot of publishing houses have actually sold off or closed down their young adult imprints. So it's harder to sell YA right now. middle grade as well. They're looking for escapist middle grade. So if you have any serious issues in your story that's middle grade, it's a lot harder to sell that right now. But I don't want that to discourage people because the market changes all the time. So a few years ago, middle grade and YA, you could sell anything at that time. It could be crap and it was selling. And so that was fine. So it's going to come back. Everything comes back. But the number two genres, or the two genres in the world, are romance and mystery. Those are always selling no matter what.
Yes, and if you want to learn how to write a romance, we've got our romance specialist here, Linda O'Donnell, and she's going to be teaching the next 6 weeks to write and edit a romance. So there is information in the Fictionary community about that. Okay, back to Peter. I have a good story, but need a good editor. Where do I find someone who can help polish this manuscript to prepare for an agent? So I'm going to just answer this quickly, and then you can take over, Kristina. So we have a lot of story coach editors who edit at the structural level. Linda's one, she's here. Brandy's another, she's here. We have about 30 of them. They all have different specialties, and you can kind of get to know them in the community if you want to see who they are, etc. And they do their edit in the Story Coach software, which then gets delivered to a Storyteller Premium account. But there's also different kinds of editing. And when you're talking about polishing, if you're past needing story structure, then we get to copy editing, proofreading, etc. So Kristina, maybe you want to comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, it depends where you're located. If you're in Canada, there is Editors Canada who have certified editors that you can go and look them up and find a great editor with good reviews, who's in good standing with the organization, who has been tested in order to be a part of that organization, because unfortunately anyone can call themselves an editor. They don't have to study it. They could have never even edited a book and they've put themselves out there as an editor. Or also they might not be any good. That can also happen, unfortunately. So in Canada has Editors Canada, and America has the American Association of Editors. They usually have rosters of people that you can look up, see that they're in good standing. They've had qualifications to be a part of that organization. They adhere to a code of ethics. That kind of thing. So that is somewhere where you can get someone, and they'll say what their specialty is, if they do developmental editing, line editing, copy editing, proofreading, whatever it is that you're looking for. And they'll usually say if they do fiction or nonfiction, and if it's fiction, what kind of fiction they're best at editing. So those are reputable places you can go. The other thing is, if you know other writers who would recommend an editor that they've used that they really enjoyed, that's probably best than just Googling book editor. You'll get tons of hits, but you won't know what you're getting in terms of quality.
And so I'll link that up to Wilder's comment is, can a fictionary editor be, or would a fictionary editor be a book coach? So we don't specialize in book coaching. We specialize in structural editing of fiction. And the reason we created the Fictionary certification program for editors is because we had so many writers telling us they didn't get a good edit. And so we wanted to provide a group of editors who we know are trained and know how to edit a story, and that we can back up the edit for if there's an issue. We're there, to make sure the edit is of the highest quality possible, just to kind of address that problem. So go ahead.
Well, I can say agents helping writers, we have literary agents who are book coaches. If you choose a literary agent to be your book coach, whether with us or anyone out there who's a literary agent that might do this on the side, you should know that in their code of ethics, if they choose to take you on as a client, they must refund your money for any editorial work they did on your book specifically. Just so that you know, because they're not allowed under their code of ethics to accept money from their clients.
Oh, interesting.
So at Agents Helping Writers, as soon as you sign a contract with one of our agents, if one of them chooses to represent you, we just refund your money. So that's on the first page of our website. But if you choose to go to another company, you should just know that is well within your rights.
Nice. That is good to know. I didn't know that. Marty says, is there a difference between agents in the US and those in the UK, how they operate, the advice or guidance they give, etc.?
Generally, it'll be the same. Even their code of professional ethics is generally the same, give or take some small things that might be related to copyright laws in your country of origin. The only difference is America is where the money is. So the US has the biggest population for book purchasing, book buying power. It's where all the big publishing houses are located, their headquarters. So agents who work in North America have more contacts with American agents and publishers, specifically American publishers. They spend half their job networking and calling them and having coffee with them and trying to figure out what those acquiring houses are looking for. So if you're located in Britain, it's a little harder for them to do that kind of networking in America. That doesn't mean they don't have contacts. It just, they probably have to work a little harder at it, and will generally try and sell your books at book fairs where these publishing houses set up, and it's basically like a booth where you make appointments with everybody and pitch your clients' books. But the advice is generally the same. There's probably like some slight cultural changes, like American publishers refuse to read any manuscripts, and agents as well, that are not written in American English. So if you put a U in color, you have to take those out when you query American literary agents, because for some reason they just can't handle that. I don't understand why, but they cannot. Same with formatting your manuscript in Britain, like they use single quotes and all that kind of stuff. So you have to make sure that your manuscript is formatted the right way, depending what country you are pitching in. But you can be located in another country and have an American agent. You can be in Canada and have a British agent. All of that is fine. There's strangely no borders for fiction.
So, the spelling thing is really interesting. So for my novels, I had one that was shortlisted for Crime Writers of Canada, one that was shortlisted for CWA in the UK. And then I had another one of them that I had into a US competition. And the feedback I got was I wasn't shortlisted because the story was great, but it had so many typos, we just couldn't read it. And you think, I didn't have a single typo. What are you talking about? And then I realized when they marked it, you think, I use a U in color and all of that stuff. And so now I co-author books with Lucy and we write in American English. Well, okay, we try. And then we have an editor who editors us for US English. So then we've got a Brit and a Canadian, and we want it edited for US English for that reason, that it's very easily just to get bumped for, it was a big learning. I was crushed, of course, but it was a big learning for me.
And it's also like some cultural words like tire, like TYRE, and tire, TIRE, and curb, and all these kinds of things that you need to be mindful of. Especially
So
with
find
American.
a good copy editor who is doing the English that you want.
And also I would say American agents, they're a little bit more open now, but they are still prejudiced against stories that are not set in America or a huge international city. That doesn't mean they're going to totally discount your manuscript, but if they had to choose between two manuscripts in front of them, they're going to take the one that's set in middle of nowhere, Iowa, versus something set in middle of nowhere, Canada, unfortunately.
I live in nowhere, Canada. There's 1,000 people in my town.
Yeah, if you want an American publisher, an American agent, that is something to consider. That doesn't mean you should change your story. That doesn't mean you'll get no's everywhere. It's just something to be mindful of, and how important is the location of your setting in your story. Especially if you're writing stories where it's a made-up town, then who cares what state it's in, or if it's in a state, made-up name. Just tell them it's an American town.
Yeah. Kristina wants to just follow that with, so do you mean someone living in the UK can publish in the US? And I think you might have answered that in there.
Yes. So the first publishing house that acquires your book, that is where its original publishing is. So if you're in the UK and you sell to, I don't know, Macmillan in the US first, it becomes an American published book. And after that, your agents will sell it foreign rights to other countries, including the UK. So they'll sell it to Macmillan UK as a foreign rights deal, as opposed to a publishing deal. And basically there's no difference. You're still going to get money for the book. It's just, it's going to be a translation deal. and a foreign rights deal, as opposed to a publishing deal that's like, 2 books or 3 books or whatever.
Oh, interesting. All kinds of cool tidbits here.
Same for
Fantastic.
audiobooks, same thing. They'll have first right of refusal for your audiobook rights. And then after that, they'll sell them off for foreign rights.
Okay. Okay, I think I caught everybody's questions. Brandy had a very interesting comment. Another historical thing I did not know, the letters were dropped in American English because of charging per character in newspapers and such. There you go. Somebody should use that in a book, in a murder mystery. There should
Exactly.
be a clue for something. I don't know what, but something. Let's just stash that aside for writing about later. Okay, anybody else have any questions they'd like to ask? Oh, Linda says that's the same reason they eliminated the double space after the period that we were, everybody my age was trained double space, and then to go back to one is really hard. It's your whole life. Click. Now we're back.
And if you want to make a copy editor super happy, never put in a space at the end of the period, at the end of a paragraph. That will save you thousands of dollars in copy editing.
That is interesting.
Is to set the type, they have to delete every single one of those spaces at the end of a paragraph.
Yeah, tricky, right? Okay, we're still on this topic. This is great. It was also because Noah Webster wanted to differentiate American English from British, and he wrote the dictionary. I guess if you write a dictionary, you got a lot of power. You can say
Exactly.
You can say whatever it is you want. Kristina, is there ever a time when you would take a novel, like if you rejected it the first time, would you ever consider it for a second submission for any reason? Or is that always a no?
For an agent?
Hmm.
Generally, no. So you have one shot with the book. In very, very rare circumstances, if your premise is really different and unique, the agent might say, here's some feedback, go rewrite it and come back in a year with a new manuscript. But that happens like 0.0001% of the time. So you want to make sure that your manuscript is as good as it could possibly be when you give it to an agent.
Right. Okay.
Because if you try and submit it again, they log all the manuscripts that they've done, so the system that they use will reject it.
You don't even get past the system, so
even if you change the name, even it's
okay. Now tell us a secret. What's your thing? The one thing that if you see it, it's just a no for the manuscript.
Filter words. So filter words are things that when you're writing in a certain point of view, they put distance between the reader and the story. So things like, I heard him walking down the hall, because they could see them walking down the hall. So when you're writing in first person, you can just say, the man walked down the hall. You don't need to see, I heard, I saw, obviously there are some exceptions where that works, like if they're listening through a wall. But generally, filter words are usually a sign of an inexperienced writer, because that's the first thing to come out. In edits, it also tells me your manuscript has not been edited or polished by anyone else. Tells me that point of view is maybe something you struggle with. And chances are I'm going to find other point of view issues along the way where you slip out of point of view, because you're using those words. And there's a whole list of them. It could be like, wow. I heard, I thought, I saw, I spotted, like all these thesaurus lookup that you're doing. Yep. I also spot those filter words. So that's probably the number one, because it's going to be in the first paragraph. And when I see that, I'm like, it's not ready.
Okay. So now let's continue on this line for a second. So I'm sure for everybody here, that is just amazing advice, right? We're all going to now go and look at our writing and look for filter words okay, out. And we can help each other with that. Feel free to find partners in the community and do that. So you talked about point of view. Now, why is it important to stay in a point of view voice?
Well, the number one reason is if you slip out of point of view, it takes the reader out of your story. They immediately, even if they don't know what's wrong, they feel jarred, like they just woke up from a dream and they're like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. They'll continue reading, but they'll be confused why that took them out of the story. The second is consistency in voice. So voice is the number one thing that agents look for in a manuscript. Because if I told you the premise of the story was a young boy discovers he's a wizard and goes to a special magic school where he learns how to be a magician, I could name hundreds of books with that premise. But what makes it special is the voice of the character and who they are. And so when you're writing in point of view and you're writing in deep point of view, you're writing from the point of view of that character, whether it's in third person limited, third person close, or first person. Very rarely do people write in second person. Those usually works better for short stories, but you want that consistency in the character. You want to feel like everything is being filtered through that character's perspective, experience, how they see the world. I often give the example, if you have a character who's really negative and is walking down the street on a busy sidewalk, they might be talking about the loudness of the cars and, you know, the exhaust that they're smelling, that they're coughing on and choking on, and the crush of bodies and that kind of stuff. And then if you have the same character in the same scene walking on the same sidewalk, but they're kind of like a Pollyanna positive person, they might be like, I wonder where all these people are going today to work, and wonder what about this, and look at the beautiful city, and it's so lively and vibrant, and look at all these people that I could possibly meet. And so that's how those two characters would describe it differently. So word choice matters. How you put the sentence together matters, because you want to end certain things on power words, or you want to have certain rhythm and musicality to your words depending on the character. So the point of view is super, super important to stay consistent and to stay in it. Because as soon as you slip out of it, readers notice, editors notice, agents notice. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. You really have to practice staying in point of view. It's very easy to have a little slip and not even notice it. So it's
Sometimes
tricky.
it's one sentence and
Yep.
you're like, nope, can't be there. How could they know this information unless X, Y, Z? So
Yep.
it goes to the structure of your story, like voice and POV is so important.
Yeah. Okay, Robin wants to know, what do you think of writers using omniscient point of view today?
It's still being acquired, but it's not as popular as it used to be. Like all the classics tended to be mostly in omniscient point of view. So you often see it in children's books. That's where it's most popular, because children are still understanding their place in the world and how things work. And so it's easier for them if it's written in third person omniscient. Um, but other stories, because it's really hard to pull it off well, um, most stories that write in that point of view tend to get rejected because it's so hard to do it well without head hopping,
Right.
which is the number one sin of third person omniscient. It doesn't mean you can't write in it, but you just need to be extremely vigilant that you're not head hopping, and therefore slipping out of point of view.
So this leads right into Peter's question. So can you briefly define point of view, and then right behind that, talk about what head hopping is?
All right. So, point of view is the perspective that you're telling the story. So, there's first, second, third close, and third omniscient. So, first person is when you're using the I. I walked down the street. I had a big breakfast. I. That doesn't mean every sentence should start with I. Please don't do that. Your manuscript will get rejected. But everything is told through that one person's lens. So if your character's name is Bob, then everything that happens in the story is told through Bob's point of view. So depending who Bob is, if he's an alcoholic, if he's a family man, if he's a workaholic, whoever he is, the story needs to reflect that. The words you choose need to reflect that, because everything is how Bob sees it, how Bob talks about it, how Bob sees things, how Bob sees other people. And Bob can be wrong because it's Bob's point of view. So maybe Caroline is a super nice person, but Bob hates her because she constantly steals his yogurt from the fridge at work. So the way he sees Caroline and the way he talks about her is going to be negative, even if you as the author know Caroline's very nice, because it's through Bob's first person point of view with the I. Second point of view is very uncommon in novels, but it has been out there. It's when you're using you. you are this, you walked over to me, you handed me a glass. One TV show that did that really well was called You, based on Carolyn Kepney's books, basically about a stalker. And he would talk about the person he's watching, like, you are doing this, you put that book on the shelf and it made my heart flutter, you da 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 da. Very rare to use that in fiction, some in novel writing. Sometimes we see it in short stories and literary fiction that are more experimental. Third person point of view, you've got two options. One is omniscient, which is like a godlike voice that sees everything, knows what everybody's thinking, what everybody's doing at any given time. And you would use like he, she, they, or the character's name, always. And that's told through the author's point of view when you use omniscient. It's not used by a character. So it's, the Marcus walked over to the store and he bought this and he saw Julia and Julia said this to him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So very distant, because you're putting space between the reader. The reader isn't in anyone's head when that happens, when they're reading third person omniscient. Third person close is very, very similar to first person, except you're still using he, she, they. But you're choosing one character to see that chapter or that scene through their world, through their eyes, and you might switch to a different character later on or not. It just gives you more flexibility with description because you can have a little bit of a wider lens when you're using third person limited, sorry. You just have a bit of a bonus flexibility to describe. Let's say if someone walks into the room, third person limited allows you to say, like, there are two bookcases standing behind Kristina and they were crammed with books and they were these colors and da-da-da-da-da. Whereas if you're seeing it through a character's eyes, like for me, I've been in this room millions of times. I don't even notice the bookcases anymore. So I wouldn't choose to describe them in deep point of view when I enter this room. If my cat's knocked something over and there's a bunch of pencils on the ground, I would notice that. That's different for me. So I would say, like, oh my God, there are pencils everywhere on my blue carpet. It's sort of the idea of if my partner walked into the room, I wouldn't say like, oh, he walked in and he's 6'2" and he has, a shaved head and he's wearing a blue shirt and da-da-da. If he walked in with blood all over him, I would notice that. But I don't tend to consciously, as a character, notice what this person looks like who I've seen millions of times over and over and over.
But why does he have blood on him? That's the real thing.
God knows. It could be anything.
What's going on in your house?
I'm very abusive. No. Last time is because he drove into the garage and miscalculated and hit his arm. But anyways, it's a whole other story for how that
it has happened.
It has happened. And head hopping is when you go into different characters' minds and say what they're thinking and feeling, which is really jarring for a reader if Bob was thinking that Caroline was stealing his yogurt again. And then Caroline was wondering why Bob was looking at her like that. And then Jane just walked in the room and she was wondering why Bob and Caroline were looking at each other. That gets really confusing and it's really, really difficult to do well. Usually what we see when people do try that is to have one chapter per character and then they kind of switch back and forth along the way because it's too confusing unless you can head hop masterfully. But it's essentially just knowing what every single character in that room is thinking and feeling and saying it from their perspective in the novel.
And there are authors who do it, like Nora Roberts does it in some of her books, but she's a pro,
She's written over 200 books. Like,
right.
So
she's pretty practiced, right? So you can do it, but you better be good at it.
Yeah, and there's, I think it's the Dinner Ladies Society or Club that came out that does head hopping and does it quite well.
Yep. So it can be done. It's just very difficult.
Mm-hmm. So if it's your first novel, try a different point of view for your first novel.
Yeah. And practice each scene or each chapter from one character's point of view, and then try and write it from another and see what happens. It's really hard.
I was just going to say one exercise I often do about point of view when you're trying to choose it for your novel is to write one scene from one character's point of view and then write the scene in third person, write it in third person limited, et cetera, et cetera. And you'll see how different they are. And they should be different. If all you did was change the he to I, you have done it wrong.
Don't do that. Okay.
Don't do that.
And nobody go practice that. Don't do it.
So it should be drastically different. And that's how you kind of can make decisions on what point of view you want to use for your book.
And it is a big decision, right? And a lot of it is based on what you're doing in your book and what type of book it is. And I mean, mystery and crime stories often have more point of views than some of the fantasy or romance story, for example, right? So genre has a little bit of it. Story structure has a little bit of it. There's many reasons.
Reader expectations, what they expect in the genre, what they expect from that type of book.
Yep. It's all important. Okay, so just Kristina wants to know, how much does Story Audit cost?
Story Audit is $1,800 split into 3 payments of $600. So unless you want to pay the whole cost up front, there's no penalty for splitting the cost. Most of our story auditors want to do 3 payments of $600 over the time instead.
Perfect. Well, I stuck both links there again. If you just scroll up a tiny bit in the chat, they're there for anyone who's interested in either of the programs. We have 1 minute to go. Kristina, you were fabulous. Tons of information in there, lots of tidbits. The session is recorded, so we'll get it out in the next few days and post it in the community up on YouTube for anyone who wants to rewatch it. Or anyone who missed it, I'll say hello to you now because you're watching now. But Kristina, as always, so lovely to hear from you and such a vast amount of information to share with our group here, and we all really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me, and thank you so much for everyone's questions. They were really great.
I know, I love the questions part. I love sessions like this because then you learn stuff that you wouldn't even think about asking. So yes, thank you to everyone who asked questions. That's really nice. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your day wherever you are in the world.